Well, thank you.
A round of applause already.
Oh, that's right. I just have to stand here. Thank you. And thank you for your patience as well. I'm going to talk to you about today a little bit about neuroscience and the integration of that with hypnotherapy. So some of the things I plan to take you through today is an introduction, which I've just done. Neuroscience 101, we'll go through that. I'm going to demonstrate to you how I demonstrate to my clients the knowledge I have of the brain. I've got a little video to show, and I've got a lovely little story about a client of mine, 12-year-old Ella, to tell you about. We're going to look at stress in the brain, so the psychological and the physiological impacts of stress on the brain and the body, some neural pathways, breaking habits, and finally I'm going to introduce to you, some of you I know already know, my ESI tool, which is Executive State Identification. It's a mapping tool that maps the behaviours in a person. So let's begin. Let's begin. Let's begin. No, it doesn't want to begin. Doesn't want to begin. What's coming up? This is actually the next part is about the brain. So how do I tell you? No one's going to be able to fix it because the guy went away, didn't he? So let me draw a brain for you. If all else fails, whoops. Let me tell you about the different parts of the brain, because I don't think it's going to... No, it's not talking, is it? Down in here, we have the brain stem. Now, this interesting part about the brain stem, it begins developing at 3 weeks in utero, and it's fully functional and fully developed at birth. Its primary purpose is survival. It keeps us alive. It does all of those automatic things like breathing, heart pumping, a whole range of things such as that. That's a survival brain. It's the primitive. Sometimes my pens can't spell, so just forgive them, won't you? And its survival is its main purpose. The brain develops from the base up and from the inside out. So our next region that I'm going to talk to you about here is the limbic region. And it's impulsive. So it's very reactive, in other words. The impulsive, in the limbic region of the brain, there's many little characters, and I'll talk to you about a few of them when we get a little bit further through the presentation. But there's one main guy in here that I just want to point out, and I call him the CEO, and let's call him the CEO here, him, because I call him the CEO of negativity, actually. So we wouldn't be negative as females, so my apologies sincerely to all the males in the room here. And it's the amygdala. And then we move upwards in the brain. Oh, and let me tell you a little bit about the amygdala too, because it's an interesting part of the brain. From 6 weeks in utero, the amygdala starts developing. You don't need that, do you? And it's particularly high functioning or more highly functioning around the 12 weeks. It also is in control of emotions as well. So that little amygdala is like the size of a thumbnail. It's like a little acorn. At birth, it is fully developed and fully functional as well. So when you think about that, how it is, all the emotions go in there, especially the negative ones. If mum has had a really bad pregnancy, perhaps she's lived in a DV, domestically violent situation, or she's been in a war-torn country, she's pregnant with bub, that baby can come out with all of those fears from mum. the fears that mum has had while she's been carrying the little baby. Does that baby carry them for life? No, not necessarily, because the baby then has to begin to interact with the environment before it makes connections and sense of the negativity or the fear that's going on for them. And then we come to, well, the cortex, but I'm just going to talk about the prefrontal cortex, which we'll call it by that. And it's the smart part of the brain, the smart part of the brain. So we go from impulsive, reactive, to the smart part of the brain there. So the primary factor for the smart part of the brain is to think and thrive. Think and thrive. Survival for here, and this part, the limbic area, so we've got survival here, and the limbic area is to keep us safe. So safety, think. I'm pressing too many buttons here. I'll put that down. So this is for think and thrive. And in actual fact, when we're operating from down here, from this base part of the brain, we're actually in survival mode. And when we're operating from a whole of brain perspective, which you probably have been all day today and are right now, this is thriving. But in life, and life events that present themselves to us can take us out of thriving, hence the clients who come to see us from time to time. They can take us down to not a lot of function out of the prefrontal cortex, meaning that I can't think, my head's cloudy, don't give me anything more because I just can't take it all on board. And so you're really operating back down here again. So we can go in and out of operations from different parts, using different parts of the brain. Now when I have my clients, I often take a board just simply like this, and I will draw this for my clients, and I'll draw it this way around. I say to them, I'm just going to tell you about your brain right now. Now, I'm not the perfect brain drawer, but it's enough. And see, I'm doing it upside down, and then I will divide, and I'll use different colours, and I will say that's your smart part of your brain. Whoops, bit hard. It's easy when I'm sitting down to do it. So I've drawn that upside down. This is the impulsive part of your brain, and I'll write the word impulsive. Now, what am I doing with my brain, writing it upside down like this? And how long did it take me to practice? Quite a while. But what am I doing? I'm firing neurons in my brain just because I'm doing it that way instead of that way. Now, sure, that's smart when I look at it here, looks a bit crazy, but my board slipped around a little bit. Another way of letting your clients know about the brain, and I've borrowed this from Dan Siegel, and you've probably seen it before, is I'll often use my hand to describe the brain. So I say to them, and I've done this over the phone because I often do a lot of phone counselling to clients, and they're stressed or they're anxious or they're, and I can hear them, as I hear them talk, I make some judgment calls about are they going to be able to understand what I'm about to say, and yes or no, and I do, and I say, look, just put that elbow on the desk. You're sitting down? Yeah. Put your elbow on the desk. And I said, put your hand up, the one that's not holding your phone, put your hand up like so. And they do, I imagine they do it, I can't see them, they're on the other end of the phone. Now fold your thumb across the palm of your hand, then fold your 4 fingers over the top of your thumb and bend your wrist forward slightly. Now you've got your brain. Now those 4 fingers are your prefrontal cortex. That's the smart part of your brain. That's the part that thinks, analyses, rationalises, creative, does a whole range of things. Just lift your fingers up for the moment. Now your thumb area, that's called the limbic area, but that's a really impulsive. It's very reactive. You know, it's there to protect us, but it's very reactive. And then I go on to say, and when you're stressed, it's like you flipped your lid and you're only operating out of there. And they get it. And if I've done this in any training sessions, in workplaces, I say to people, you've now got the new hand signal. You can walk around. If anyone's going to give you too much more work, you're overwhelmed, just give them the hand signal. They'll know because they've done this course, and they'll know that that's what it means. Oh, I've lost everything, have I? I've lost a lot. Glad I put some notes down here I can read. I'll make it up as I go along. All right. So we learn by our experiences. We know that. We learn by our experience. And this part of the brain starts activating, yes, at around 3 or 4 years of age. So we're primarily, as little children up to about that age, operating out of keeping ourselves safe and survival mode. And we usually have parents who can help us do that. By age 25, we have a mature brain. Male and female, we have a mature brain. And then if anyone in the room is over 25, you've got an aging brain. Is there anyone under 25 in this room that I need to congratulate? No? Okay, thank you. So if we learn by experiences, we learn in many different ways. A little video I had to show you, the video was one that Peter Russo, the late Peter Russo, I should say, a man that I owe my passion for the brain to. He developed this little video, and it's about a little boy who's only about 3 years of age, and he's walking in the park with his dog. It's a cartoon of it, and as he walks through the park with this little dog, not with his mum, sorry, he's got his mum, he's hanging onto his mum's hand, no dog yet, so can you just wipe that out of your brain? Wipe the dog out of your brain. Walking through the park with his mum, holding his mum's hand, and a little dog comes out. Well, little, but he's little too, so by comparison, they're similar in size. And the dog barks at him. He jumps in fright, mum jumps in fright, the dog jumps up to lick little Peter. Mum goes, oh, protection, 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 keep my little baby safe. What happens? We get firing in here. What happens? A neural network or pathway from in here is sent up to other parts of the brain saying, what about dogs? Dogs are scary. I can't touch a dog ever again. Now with encouragement to learn about dogs aren't scary, we need to engage this part of the brain. So as Peter grows and develops, remember, mum and Peter, little dog, about 3 years of age. But when he gets up to about 10, he's learned to activate a lot more of his prefrontal cortex. So he's learned to put some safety mechanisms around that not all dogs are scary, maybe some. And he meets his little friend, and his little friend has got a puppy, and he's learned that he can actually pat that puppy, and even if the puppy licks him, it's okay. So it's like brain training. Does he ever forget? Does he ever lose that neural pathway that's there? Maybe when he's older and pruning takes place, but he will always come out of there when he sees a dog, and depending on how quickly neural networks operate for him, and honestly they're 0.05 of a nanosecond, you can get a thought going through your head. He learns that it's okay, and he learns to calm himself and not be like this when he sees a dog in place. I want to tell you about a little client of mine. She's 12-year-old, little Ella, and I have permission to tell her story because her mum is a friend of mine. Ella, her mum and dad, I live on the Gold Coast, and so they live out towards the hinterland past a place called Mount Tamborine. And they've got a beautiful big house on a property. It's a 2-story house, but it's more of an open plan, like 2-story. You don't just go upstairs and then you can't see downstairs until you go down the stairs again. It's like an open, lovely house. Mum and Dad sleep upstairs and Ella has this gorgeous little room downstairs. Now I saw Ella earlier this year in January, before she went back to school, and for the last 4, 5, 6 months Ella had been going up and dragging a mattress and sleep out of Mum's cupboard and sleeping in Mum's room. And Mum didn't mind that so much because Dad spent a lot of time away, but when Dad was home they needed their private time and space too, and at 12 years of age they wanted Ella to be back in the room. So I agreed to see Ella. And she's a really smart little girl. And I told her about her brain by using my hand. And I got her to use the hand. And I told her about her CEO, the CEO of fear and negativity and all those frightened emotions. And and she got it, and she liked hearing the story, and she liked hearing about a brain. I told her about a smart brain and how she could have a whole of brain engagement happening for her if she really wanted to. And then I did some trance with her. Now, I don't know if anyone in this room specialises with children, and I don't at all, although I will see children from time to time, providing I have Mum's permission to do things. But what I found with this little 12-year-old girl was she had a great imagination. So you don't have to do a lot of deep trance to get her to imagine. And I imagined her being in her bedroom. I got her to imagine her taking her steps towards getting into bed of a night. What did she do? I'd found out all this information. What did she do? Did she go to the toilet, clean her teeth? Did Mum come in with a book? What was the process? And so we step by step went through that process. I also discovered that the laundry was next to her bedroom, and the fear had occurred one night when it was really windy and something was banging outside the laundry. Maybe it was the screen on the window or something, and that was the originator of the fear in the first place. And I talked to her about her CEO, and then in trance I got her to engage her whole of brain and to calm her brain down, and to talk to the CEO and let him know it was okay, that she was safe and she had her smart brain to protect her. So Ella went off, and I rang her mum about a week later because Ella wasn't coming back again, and said, "What happened?" And she said, "She hasn't been back in the bedroom again. She slept every night in her bed. But Ella's here, do you want to talk to her?" And I said, "Sure." So I spoke to Ella and I said, "What happened, Ella?" And she took me through the process, almost word for word of what I've said to her, that I told my CEO it was okay, didn't have to be the boss tonight, and that my smart brain was going to take care of me and keep me safe. And that's happened every night this week. Fabulous. Well done. I was really pleased for her. Let me take this one step further. And you can see my beautiful drawing of the brain, which is going to be totally out of proportion to the next step in this, because I want to talk to you now about stress and the brain. And I want to introduce you to a couple of other characters that are up here. So we've got the CEO. We've also got another guy here, and I say guy, this is the hypothalamus, but let me just put it as the H, and that's the hypothalamus is like the general manager. Down underneath there is the pituitary, and the pituitary is like the front line manager. So when you think about this, and I'm describing it to you as if you all work in organisations where you're very familiar with a CEO, general manager, frontline manager, and then all the staff. When I've worked with teachers, I will call this the principal. I will call this the senior management team, the deputy principal, and this is the senior management team. So I just adapt, depending on who my client is that's sitting in front of me at the moment. But I'm imagining you're all in corporate right now. When we're stressed, I've already said to you, it's like you flipped your lid. It is like you have flipped your lid. But what's going on? Well, there's not a lot of connection going on here, but the hypothalamus sends a message down. So we leave the CEO, because the CEO just doesn't know, it knows about the organisation, but doesn't know any of these guys all that well, probably this one. But, when it gets down to factory floor workers, it doesn't know anything much at all. So the hypothalamus sends a message down to the pituitary. The pituitary sends a message down to two little glands here that sit on top of these little things here, and you can recognise them by my beautiful drawings, called kidneys, and these are called the adrenals. And what do they measure when they're measuring stress? They measure your HPA. The message that goes down to these are like the factory floor workers, and the message that goes down to these factory floor workers, is that better if I turn it like that? Everyone? Is this: come on, work harder, work faster. And it causes what? A stress loop. Adrenals are responsible for producing adrenaline and cortisol, and when your body is producing too much cortisol or an overproduction of adrenaline, not only are you breathing faster and your breath is short, but cortisol, an overproduction of cortisol, you can't think. You can't think at all. It's like you've got permanent brain fog. So that's a stress loop that's going on there, and it's at a time like that where you probably need to see a naturopath or somebody and get some adrenal support, because you've got adrenal fatigue. And what does that mean? That means that come this time in the afternoon, and not because you've spent all day at a wonderful conference such as this, but just want to have that nana nap or that grandpa nap. And you want to eat more sugary things, so you're looking for, hence what do they do at conference? They put lollies out, don't they? And in the afternoon, if they serve afternoon tea, they're always the sweetest of things for afternoon tea. Pardon me. But there's another looping that goes on, and this looping we call neural looping, and it comes from here. It's a message. So neural pathway, pardon me, we have a little nucleus in there and some dendrites around here, and the little nucleus neuron fires electrical currents at something like 1,000 electrical currents are fired per second, and there's a 1 billion neurons in the human brain. 1 billion neurons in the human brain. So just on that matter, for example, if we were all wired up here and we had some sort of screen up, we'd have electrical firings going everywhere. We'd be all lit up. It'd be fascinating to see. But so it sends down. A neuron sends an electrical current down a pathway. And in this case, and I'll draw it from here, it's going up to the right prefrontal cortex, and it's called neural looping, associated with stress. And when you get negativity from that limbic area, or fear from that limbic area, mixed with right prefrontal cortex activity, which is creativity, you get catastrophe. So the thought that's going round and round in your head is one that, just say, I had a bruise on my thumb because I hit it with something heavy this morning before I got here, and I can't stop thinking about this thumb and this bruise. By the end of the day, I'm ready to go to the Gold Coast University Hospital and have it amputated because it won't be any use to me at all. That's when people catastrophize. And it comes when we get neural looping, and in particular when we're stressed, because we're not using our right prefrontal cortex to tell ourselves it's okay. So at this point, and I'm sorry you're having to take a photograph of my messy drawing there were some beautiful slides that displayed it so well. So what can we do with this? Let's go back to Ella's story, where I was able to tell her in simple language about her brain, and I was able to put her into a visualization state, an imaginary state, where she thought about her brain, the parts of her brain, and she talked to them. When people are stressed and they come to you, stressed is the number one component for people to come and see me today. And we need an amount of stress in our life. You know, the stress of getting here on time. You might have stayed upstairs last night, or you might have had to drive here from somewhere else, and that causes a certain amount of stress. But what does it make you do? Well, it made me get out my front door by 7 o'clock this morning. It made me get up at 5:30 to take my Rottweiler for a walk, because he would have been beside himself all day alone if I hadn't have done that. So that's the pressure you put yourself under. So everyday stress is what we need to help us keep our deadlines, to be on time, to do the things that we need to do. But when stress is greater than that, and we've got this and this, so going on in our body and going on in our brain happening, that's when they'll come to you. And it is the perfect hypnotherapy episode. What's the right word? Now I'm lost for words. I can tell you what's happening. I'm trying to think of the right word, but I'm going over the same looping of the pathway. So I've got to actually go over here. It's a perfect situation for you to induce trance in your client. See, I walked over, and while I was here, it was that looping. I walked over there, and suddenly I went, you know, when you're at home and you're trying to think of a word, or you've lost your keys, or you whatever, and you open all the cupboards, you go to the fridge, you go to everywhere thinking that you would never put your key there, but they just might be there today. If you forgot about it, and how many times do you do that before you stop? But if you forgot about it or tried to forget about it, even though you had to get in that car and drive in that next 5 minutes, you actually went outside and did something different, the placement of your keys would come to you, because your brain would go firing down different neural pathway. So that's a little bit about neural pathway. That's a little bit about stress, and how good is it to calm people down using hypnosis when it comes to stress. I've already told you there's 100 billion neurons in the brain, and neurons transmit 1,000 nerve impulses every second. How many seconds have you been sitting here? How many nerve impulses have gone on in your brain? Where have your thoughts gone? Have they always been here? And they probably haven't. Maybe you've thought of what you're going to do next, or maybe you've thought of dinner tonight. That's okay. That's how the brain operates. And that's a stimulated, energized brain, a good brain. Can I just know what time it is? Because on my slides I kind of knew. 4:35. Oh, great. We got heaps of time then. I was racing through that. Are there any questions of what I've done so far?
The foggy brain is the cortisol.
I think foggy is just a terminology, a term to describe you don't have a lot of clear thinking. Sorry, with a foggy brain, is that the cortisol? So I went backwards and said foggy is just a term to describe the brain. Cortisol, and it's not a scientific term, but cortisol, an overproduction of that, contributes to not enough brain activity going on there. Okay. I want to take you back about, 14 years when I was a youngster. I studied ego state therapy with Professor Gordon Emerson. And I was fascinated with he was using it only for hypnosis. And I said to him, you know, it's such a fabulous tool. I would like to develop it further so that we could use it without trance, because I did a lot of work in corporate as well as doing private practice too. And he said, go for it, just do it. So I started I developed what I call a mapping process, and the mapping process I called ESI, which stands for Executive State Identification, which is about understanding the different states in a person and mapping them on a sheet of paper with the client in relation to a situation that they were wanting to change, with a goal of how to get out of that situation. So I gathered over an 18-month period a whole lot of case studies, and I wrote this little book, The Many Parts of You, Understanding the Puzzle of Your Behaviour. So that was written in 2009. Now there's been a lot of work that's been done since then. I've done through my training and through learning about neuroscience, and this year enrolling in a degree in neuroscience. Who'd have thought at my age? But I am, despite what anybody has said to me. And it really has cemented what I did 14 years ago into something that's totally real. Because the states that I refer to, I've always said, and even though people have said, not just any people, but people like Gordon Emerson, and also if you've heard of Richard Hill, they've said to me, yes, they are embedded, like you say, in the neural pathways of the brain, because neural pathways contain behaviours, and these behaviours have thoughts and emotions. So what I elicited from a client was, you know, what state are you in, or what's your behaviour like then? So when you're in that state, can we name that state? And I'll show you how I do it just briefly, because there's a couple of things I want to say. I have got half a dozen books here, and I don't know how I distribute half a dozen amongst the entire audience, but if you've never been exposed to ESI and you're interested in it, there's a half a dozen books, and you're welcome to take one free of charge here at the front. But in addition to that, I've got a free offer for you that's actually in your show bag, but I'll talk to you about it. So let's say a client comes to me and is stuck, and I'll say to them something along these lines. There's a part of you that I can hear is really stuck in this problem. And do you understand when I say part, and if I get a nod, yes, and you know, I'm not talking about an arm or a leg, I'm talking about a part, an internal part. If you could give that part a name, what would you call it? And they think for a while, and they might just say to me, I might call that, it'd be better if I did up here, wouldn't I? Be able to see it a lot better. And they might call that part of them anger, let's say. So in my PowerPoint I have this slide, and the slide I was going to talk to you about was a beautiful woman who I coached, and she won pre-selection in her area in New South Wales and went on to be a member of the federal government some years ago, so I was quite proud of that. But what her fear was that when she got in front of the audience such as this, that she wanted to come across real. She didn't want to look like, because she was beautifully dressed and everything was immaculate about her. She just wanted to come across as a real person. So her map is on my slide that I was going to put up, so I'm kind of making this up as I go. So we've got a situation up here that the client has already described to me, and on this side I'm looking for a goal. So what do we want? How can we turn that around? So let's say they say to you anger. I say, okay, so could you think about being in that state of anger right now? Oh yeah, okay. So how do you behave when anger is running your show? Now, if you've heard any of the other presenters today, they've talked about subpersonalities, and I know in NLP they have parts. I just believe that what I've done is taken this another step further. How do you behave when you're angry? And they might say things like, I yell, I'm sad when I'm angry. Okay, any thoughts that are going on? Oh, yeah, I hate everyone, so, I write that down, and I do as much as possible the words that they give me. So what I'm doing is I'm profiling that state. I'm breaking it down. I'm not just giving it a name. I'm getting them to recognise exactly how they behave there when they're in that state. So whatever our goal is, and a goal might be to, wouldn't be to be happier, because that you can't say that with goals, can you? But I'm just going to say it for the moment. And there's a part of you I know that's not angry. There's a part of you that actually enjoys being in life and living and doing all those things. Yeah, they might go, what would you call that part? And just for the sake of today, we might call that happy, their happy state. Okay, so when you're happy, tell me how you're behaving. Tell me what you're thinking. And he starts to tell me. You might smile, you might feel confident, and I get a whole range of things just as up here. Now don't stop at 2, because we're looking together. Usually we get about 5, sometimes 6. We're looking together what supports that person to achieve the goal and what inhibits that person. Not positive and negative, what supports and what inhibits. Because anger might inhibit, but in another situation, anger might be necessary and might be a supportive. So that's just the terminology I use. Then when I've got a whole map of states, I put them into trance. And I talk to those states while the person is in trance. And the story might go like this. Peter's here today, and Peter is really looking to achieve. And I want to talk to some of the different parts of Peter. And I don't always get Peter to talk. I would ask him to indicate when that state is there. And I wonder if I could call on the different states. So I'd firstly like to call on the state of anger, and if you're there, could you let me know by raising the index finger of your right hand? And then when I address anger as a respectful state, because it was formed at a time when Peter needed it. And I'm so glad you're there, anger, to help him express himself by yelling and being sad and whatever else. But you know, he's trying really hard to work to achieve his goal there. And I've got some other states to talk to, so I wonder if I could come back and talk to you in a moment. And then I go through each of the other states that are there in the same way. I get them at the end to have a meeting together, to come up with a resolution, and then by the time we've finished, Peter will be able to tell me the outcome of the meeting. You never, ever, ever ask a state to go away and disappear. It's part of the neural network of this person's behaviour profile. And you can't ask it to go away, but you could ask it to have a bit of a break because it's been working so hard. That's just a way that I look at the social network of the brain. I put it into a language or a dialogue that people can, my clients can understand me, and I develop this map with them together. And I usually do it on something this size because I'll take a copy of it and keep it on their file or scan it into my computer and they take a copy home with them. And then sometimes I'll go home and they will just tell me they've added a couple of states, or they've the next session they've noticed that anger hasn't come out, that one of these other ones that we found down here has been more executive. So that's the way my ESI process works. So what we've done today, just in summary, we've looked at different parts of the brain in terms of Neuroscience 101. We've turned it into therapy so that we could show our clients, we can demonstrate the brain to our client by either drawing it on a piece of paper like this and showing it to them, by using our hand to demonstrate the brain. If I'm doing stress with the hand, I just say the adrenals are sitting down here around about your elbow area on top of your kidneys there. I've also told you a little story about how Ella, the little girl, but you could use the same principle and apply it to any of your adult clients as well. My ESI process that I developed, I've trained that and taught that in Finland, in India, in New Zealand many times, and all around Australia, and I've been to the States with it as well. And I really need to do an update on my book. I'm running on the 27th of March a one-day workshop on how to develop one of those maps, an ESI map. And in your folder there's a form that tells you all about it, with an attachment saying that if you're at this conference and you're able to come, it's absolutely free for you. That's just the one-day workshop. There's a 2-day advanced skills training that's going to be held at the end of May, and that's talked about on the flyer as well. So I think I've covered everything. I haven't got my thank you slide to show you. And is there anyone who would like a copy of the book?
I would.
Oh, I know. You pass it around. Up the back. Can we take some up? Could someone?
I'll just order one. You'll be able to get them online. I'll just order one. That's fine.
Well, I'm sorry there was no favouritism in that distribution there. It was Thank you. Thanks, Pat. You can download it for like $3 or something, is it? Yeah. And if you would like a copy of the slides or a copy of, please email me. I put my business card into, it's on there. Email and I'd happily send them to you. And if you do, what I will send you is that little video about how the brain develops, because that's lovely to watch. It gives you a great idea. So I hope to hear from each of you very soon, and thank you so much.
I'm just